Hello again. I'm Katie Bloomer with the editorial team at Book Trib, where readers come to discover, and I'd like to welcome you to another Book Trib author interview. Today I'm happy to welcome Rebecca Gray to talk about her debut young adult fantasy novel, Nightweaver, written under her pen name R.M. Gray. Set in an alternate world that combines the Gilded Age with the Golden Age of piracy, where what remains of humankind has been driven out to sea, Nightweaver tells the story of 17-year-old Violet Oberon, a cursed pirate with a mysterious past. After a lifetime of hiding from bloodthirsty monsters, Violet is captured and forced to team up with the notorious Nightweaver Will Castor, a magic-wielding lord and heir to the estate where Violet and her family are hired into service. Together, Violet and Will set out to hunt the shadow creature that killed her eldest brother. But when strange things start happening around the estate, Violet discovers the killer is already hunting her, and it's leaving a trail of bodies in its wake. Hopefully today we'll learn more about this fascinating book and the author behind it. Hi, Rebecca. How are you doing?
Hi, Katie. I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. This book is right up my alley. It's sounds really good and fascinating. And what
Thank you.
inspired you to write it?
So I have always been a huge Pirates of the Caribbean fan. That's just something that was like a huge part of my childhood. I loved it. And I always loved the way that they combined pirates with like a supernatural element. And just as somebody who consumes media, that's not something that I really like see a lot of, and could kind of like scratch that itch. So I wanted to do something like that. I've always loved pirates just in general. And, when it comes to pirates, they always, they're notoriously superstitious. They believe in ghosts and, paranormal phenomenon and things like that, mermaids and monsters. And so, those things were really real to them. So I wanted to create a world where those things were real. In this setting. So that's kind of what inspired me. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned Pirates of the Caribbean because many reviewers have described your book as Pirates of the Caribbean meets YA romantasy. How do you feel about that?
I embrace it. Who doesn't love Pirates of the Caribbean? So I'm like, if that's what you think of, because like I said, there's not a whole lot of things out there like that. It's kind of one of those things where if you want to, watch or read something like Pirates of the Caribbean, you kind of just find yourself going back to Pirates of the Caribbean because it's, there's not a whole lot out there, at least that I've seen or that I've found, that kind of takes you on that kind of adventure. So I embrace it.
So it's obviously not exactly like Pirates of the Caribbean.
Right.
So how did you go about creating the world of Nightweaver?
That's a good question. So I wanted to take, like I said, those elements of, it's pirates and there's like a supernatural element going on, but I wanted to see what would happen if you combined that with more of your traditional fantasy elements. So, like there's things like unicorns and dragons and, things like that that you don't typically think of when you think of pirates. And I wanted to add magic, but in a way that felt familiar, but also was a bit of a new take. And, there's things like, it's not a book about vampires, but there's definitely some like vampire lore. There's some like elemental magic systems, just in a way that feels new and fresh, and unique, but still familiar. And it isn't overwhelming to the point that you have a hard time sort of grasping it. And so I wanted to draw from like a darker aesthetic, but also give it a very like warm, inviting feel. Kind of, I was telling somebody the other day, it's kind of like when you watch something like Disney's Haunted Mansion, either one of the Haunted Mansions, and you're like, this is like, there's a lot of really scary stuff going on, but at the same time, if you gave me the opportunity, I would definitely curl up by that fireplace and read a book type feeling. It's like cozy and, so I kind of wanted to give the world of Nightweaver that sort of feel. Like it's dangerous and it's terrifying, but it's also magical and enchanting and, a place that you might want to visit. So
can you tell us a bit about the main characters, Violet and William?
So, Violet is a fiercely loyal person. As she, at her core, she wants the best for her family. She wants her family to be safe. And some people have described her as stabby but lovable, which I'm all about. But yeah, she's just very loyal. She's brave, but not brave in a way, where she's just not afraid of anything. I mean, she's definitely scared all the time, but she's willing to do anything, like I said, to protect her family. So, and then as far as William goes, as he is most often referred to as Will in the book, he is a lot of the same as far as he's also very loyal to his family. He's the exact opposite of everything that Violet had expected Nightweavers to be, based off what she's been told. He's very gentle and he's kind and he's charming. And so even in the beginning, when, like Violet maybe doesn't trust him necessarily, she sees that he has the same sort of loyalty to his family. He's willing to do anything to protect his family. And so there's at least a level of respect there between the two characters that I think is sort of fun to build on and play with. So
It sounds like the sort of duo I would love to read about.
yes.
And it sounds like family might be a big theme in the book as well. Can you tell us about some of the bigger themes you explore in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So it definitely deals with a lot about loss and grief and how that affects a family dynamic, especially it's a bigger family dynamic in the book, which is something that I sort of drew from my own personal experiences. I come from a big family, and so when you're dealing with something like grief, it affects everybody differently, and sort of playing with those dynamics within the family. But still at the end of the day, this is a family that, like I said, they would do anything for each other. They care really deeply for each other. I mean, they're willing to jump into action to protect each other, no matter what. So definitely family is a huge, that's sort of the big theme in the book is, what are you willing to do for your family? And just sort of how everybody deals with grief differently. So yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about your writing process? Are you someone who has to have everything mapped out, or do you like to deviate from your outline, or both?
Both, definitely both. I would say I always have a plan. And I really like, even when I started writing this first book, this is the first of 5. And so when I started the first one, I went ahead and mapped out, the whole plan. Where do I see this going? How is it going to break up? What's the arc? So I always have a plan. And even sometimes when I'm within a chapter or something, I'll kind of like have little bullet points of like, these are sort of plot points that I want to hit. But I deviate. I can't help it. Sometimes you have a good plan and you're like, this is how I want it to go. And then you start writing and you're like, maybe if I just, sort of did something different, maybe, and then that opens up a whole new thing. And then you're reevaluating your whole plan. So I definitely like to give myself room. I always tell people I know where I want to go, but I'm not always entirely sure how I'm going to get there. So I definitely like to do a bit of both. I like to have a plan, but I like to give myself room to deviate from the plan, which I most often do. So
Sounds like a nice way to go about doing things.
I think so.
Are there any writers in particular that served as inspiration for your work?
For just my work in general, so one of my favorite authors, her name is a lot of people know her. She wrote Ella Enchanted. Her name is Gail. I always mess up her name because I get tongue twisted, but it's Gail Carson Levine or Line. But she wrote my favorite book when I was a kid. It was The Two Princesses of Bamar. If anybody is listening or watching and you've never heard of that book, go read it. It's amazing. So it was just like my favorite book as a kid. And it like really is kind of what served to inspire me to think like, like I could do this. And so she actually wrote a book on writing and the writing process. And it's tailored more for young people, but I tell people all the time, I'm like, I still pick it up and like open it up because it still inspires me. But it's called Writing Magic. And so yeah, her style of writing is just beautiful. And so that's always really inspired me. And then there's an author by the name of A.G. Howard. She wrote a series, the way that I discovered her, she wrote a series called Splintered. And it's like a Alice in Wonderland retelling. And just the way that she was able to draw from lore that everybody is very familiar with, but give it a really fresh spin. And she creates this really lush, dark world that, you know, again, is one of those things where it's like, it's really terrifying and I don't know if I would survive, but I still kind of want to go there. So that was definitely a huge inspiration to me, just that, that you could do things like that and people would vibe with it. So.
Well, definitely some interesting authors that I'll be adding to my TBR.
Yes.
So you mentioned that Nightweaver is the first in what you plan for 5 books.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit how you plan to continue this story, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I definitely plan to continue it. I think as far as the first book goes, it's sort of like, because within the book, you know, the main character Violet, she spent her whole life at sea, and so she's sort of thrust into this totally new world where she doesn't really know what's going on. Sort of everything that she thought she knew was not really how things are. And so the first book, she's really trying to sort of, you know, find her footing and get a grip on things. And I think it's kind of fun because she and the reader are both experiencing sort of the same, you know, you're learning about things all at the same time. So, you know, and like I said in the first book, she's sort of found herself in, she's really deeply involved in this quest for vengeance. You know, she's lost her brother, and that's sort of how she deals with her grief. She throws herself into this, you know, plot for, you know, revenge. And I think it's going to be fun for people to see her grow throughout the series, and sort of really, you know, because she kind of loses herself in this, you know, in the grief and everything. And so I think it'll be interesting to see where that goes, see how she develops as a character, and sort of, you know, discovers more about herself and, you know, what she wants, and, you know, separating herself. I think even a lot of people can relate, if you come from, you know, a big family, or if you have siblings, especially if you're the older sibling, you know, or even if you're the younger sibling, you know, you're so protective of your family and you want the best for your family. And sometimes you can sort of put yourself aside, to, you know, help with other things and help with family. So I think it'll be interesting to see Violet's journey as she kind of comes into her own, in true YA fashion. But yeah, I'm excited. Like I said, this is just a little bit of almost a primer to the world of Nightweaver. You're just sort of dipping your toe in. So I think as things progress, you know, you're going to discover a lot more about the mythology and the lore, and you're going to see, you know, more mythological creatures, and kind of just, it's going to open up into a much bigger, you know, this is just like the first layer of the onion, I guess you could say. So I'm excited to write the rest. People ask me all the time, you know, like, what's your plan? You know, like, what's going to happen? And I'm like, I can't tell you because it's a spoiler, you know? But there's certain things that I'm excited to reveal as things go on, that I'm like waiting to get to that part where I can finally like share it with the world and not just have to like hold it all inside. But yeah, so.
It sounds like an exciting journey ahead for you and the characters.
I think so.
So aside from Nightweaver, do you have any other projects coming up you want to tell us about, or?
Yeah, so I'm working on a lot of different things right now. I have a hard time sitting still, I guess. I like to be busy. So my husband and I are actually about to start a podcast called Morally Gray with an A. And so he's a huge film buff. That was his, you know, major in college and everything. And so we both love stories and storytelling. And I always tell people, my favorite conversations that I have, about the craft of storytelling, I have with my husband. We like to ride down the road and talk about that kind of stuff. And we've said it so many times, we're like, we should really be recording this, we should start a podcast. And so I finally told him the other day, I was like, look, we're doing this. Like, I'm going to announce it. It's going to be real. And so we're really excited about that. I have a few other projects I'm working on. Obviously I'm working on Nightweavers sequel. So I'm excited about that. That's fun. But also I have a project that I had been working on before I started working on Nightweaver. My editor, as well as my dad, who likes to read my work, have been very much in my ear telling me, you need to publish this. You need to like move forward with this. So I don't know. I'm kind of thinking maybe after I get the sequel, more developed and out there and in the works, as far as, leading up to being published and all that, I might consider taking that one down off the shelf. And it's a really fun, like, sci-fi fantasy. I like to pitch to people as Treasure Planet meets Anastasia. So I've figured out, usually I didn't think at first that was like the best way to market it, but I've the more people that I tell that to, the more they're like, oh my God, those are like two of my favorite things. So I'm like, I'm just going to stick with that then. But it's fun. It's set in space, but it's not space as we know it. It's more of that, like, physics defying, like, really warm, fantastical space that you see like in Treasure Planet, which is one of my favorite movies. So, but yeah, so I'm excited about that. That's something that it's always in the back of my mind. Cause I tell people that was really more of my like heart project. I've been working on that for a couple of years before I started Nightweaver. So I'm excited to see, where all of that stuff goes, but obviously I'm working on Nightweaver. That's got a lot of my main focus at the time. So.
Well, both of those sound really exciting. I'm really excited about Treasure Planet meets Anastasia. That sounds really right up my alley as well.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Well, it looks like we are about out of time for today, folks. Again, the book is Nightweaver. The author is R.M. Gray. Rebecca, thanks for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you for having me. It was an honor. So
it was great. Well, I'm Katie Bloomer. See you next time. But until then, go read a book.